I'm Senator Joe Lieberman, and I'm glad you're watching Rabbi Doug.
We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight. But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're going to watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug.
Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're going to see Rabbi Doug. Oh, everybody talk about Doug.
Shalom and welcome to Taped with Rabbi Doug. We are here on location in Los Angeles, California, and I am here with Ida Zeldin, who this week celebrates her 100th birthday. We just celebrated. Tell me something, and this is the first question I want to ask you for those who are watching. Do you remember 100 years ago, or not 100 years ago, but do you remember 97 years ago? Do you remember when you were a very young child? Where did you live? You were born in Chicago.
Right.
Your parents came from where in Europe?
Russia.
They came from Russia. And both your parents came from Russia.
As far as I know.
And they came directly to Chicago?
I don't recall. I wasn't old enough to know. We never discussed that, so I don't know.
You're the oldest of the three children? You're the oldest of three children. So you have a brother who's right under you and then a sister who was much younger.
Right.
And they're both gone. But your brother Arthur, and he was a dentist in Aurora, Illinois. And Norma lived in Peterson Park in the north side of Chicago. And you lived on the west side of Chicago, then moved to... later, after you were married, after the West Side changed, you moved to LaGrange, Illinois, and then to Los Angeles. Tell me about growing up. Do you remember the name of your schools? Do you know what high school did you go to?
Thule.
You went to Thule High School. So you lived on then you moved to the near north side. You lived in the, Thule was on the near north side, and you lived near Division Street in California,
Yes, right.
in that area?
We lived on a new section of the street at that time. I can't recall the exact name of it.
But you lived on the near north side of Chicago. You went to Thule High School.
Right.
And Thule High School no longer exists in Chicago. It became Clementi High School, I believe, if I remember, Roberto Clementi High School in its transition and change.
I think that was near Oakley Boulevard or something.
Correct.
We used to walk home from there, and I had to stop at the bakery and butter next door and bring things home.
So you did things like that. Tell me, what did you do as a child? I asked you this a long time ago. You told me that you used to go to the beach a lot with your friends. What was childhood like in Chicago on the near north side growing up and going to high school?
Well, we all had friends. The families had to know who you were, where you're going. You couldn't just tell your mother or father, oh, I'm going to meet some friends, we're going to the beach. It had to be people that they knew the family of. We'd take the streetcar and we'd go, but not too often. Otherwise, we went with the family.
And then, tell me about family. Now, your parents, who I knew your mother, of course, very, very well, who passed away in 1980. Your parents lived among other family members in the community. Her sister, and were the family all close by each other? Or were some on the near north side, some on the west side?
That's true. Aunt Rose, my mother's sister, we lived on Richmond Street. And then my mother's grandmother and grandfather were up there, Fetcher Yudel and Muma Chippe. And they lived on Richmond across the street. And my mother's sister Rose lived halfway up the block. And when we go on a Sunday with the streetcar and come there, we had to go to Muma Chippe and we got sour pickle and sauerkraut that they made every year. And a piece of challah to go with it. And that was enjoyable. Now,
your grandparents, who came here with your mother when she was little, they are buried in Waldheim Cemetery. Zavel Rosenberg,
right.
And Nechama Rosenberg, and they are there. How well did you know your grandparents, your mother's parents?
Would you believe that I remember my grandfather, my mother's father?
Your mother's father, Zavel.
he had diabetes, he had amputated a leg.
He had to amputate his leg, really?
And he had a long beard, and with all the sons, nobody could take care of him. He was kosher. My mother took him to our house. And I remember we had a big brass bed. We had a big, this while we lived upstairs in the grocery store.
This is when you were on the south side.
South side.
This is when you were on the south side. So you lived upstairs from the grocery store?
Wendell Phillips High School was the block where my father and mother went to learn English at night. Reading and writing.
They took classes. Very interesting. And so I have a picture of him with that big beard. I know he had that big beard. Did you interact with him? Did you?
My mother took him in.
Oh, he took him into your house. And this is after her mother passed away?
Right. That's when he had the long red beard. I remember him lying there, the brass bed and the white sheet. My mother took care of him, fed him. My father would bathe him, and take care of him.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. And your grandfather, when he passed away, you were a little girl or a little bit older?
I can't remember, honey. I don't remember when he passed away. That I don't remember.
But you remember him in the house with you, living with you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. My mother kept kosher too, of course, always. And Auntie Charity, you know who Auntie Charity is?
No.
Mildred's mother?
Jenny.
Jenny.
Right.
She lived further away. She would take the streetcar sometimes and come over with her. She brought stuff with. I do know one thing.
Was she Kaplan? What was her like? Kaplan, right? So that's Rafe Kaplan's grandparents. Okay.
And also, I want you to know one of our uncles, Louis Laser, my mother's brother, had a route where he came with, I don't know if he had a horse and wagon at that time, and I don't remember the car, I remember a wagon like. Maybe I don't remember that too sure. He would bring herring and a chicken from the west side. He shopped for everybody.
Wow.
And that was his business. But my mother bought herring, he brought all the stuff that she couldn't get around there.
On the south side.
On the south side.
Very interesting.
I remember that sort of thing. Couldn't figure out why. Now I realize that over the years I knew. That's a long time.
Yes, it is.
You've got to stop and think.
Yeah.
Just because I'm hungry, 100 years old now, doesn't mean that when I was 10 or 12 that I remember where I went. You know.
Tell me about your family gatherings. Often many families, the Minch family, the Rosenberg family, your mother's and your father's family, did they have family gatherings? Were those like those cousin clubs and those picnics?
Yes.
Those things that all took place?
And something I just thought of. My mother's brother Morris and his wife lived across the street of Bumachipper and Peter Udall on Richmond Street. Therefore, when we went up there were several people to meet. And then there was another family connection with Irving Hoffing's family, who was my uncle. I just can't remember so much now. As my son tells me, my Rolodex is crowded, and that's why I can't have room for much more, and I forget.
Now the Hoffings, and an interesting story. Tell me how the connection to the Hoffings. How was that? It was from Zavel and Nechama's family. One of their siblings was Hoffing.
Right.
So which one was that? Was that
Rose Hoffing married Irving? Sure. My mother's sister.
Rose Rosenberg married Irving Hoffing. Okay. Very good. And then, but that was a nephew of your grandmother's and grandfather's sibling who was also Hoffing, right? Because one of them in the family reunion, the family that came from Canada were the grandchildren of your grandparents' siblings who were Hoffings, also buried in Waldheim. Which the families were all together. And the Hoffings, when your Aunt Rose, your mother's sister, married into the Hoffing family, they were already cousins from your grandparents' family. So it just expanded.
She married a cousin, Aunt Rose and Uncle Isaac. They had to go to Crown Point, Indiana.
Because in Illinois, first cousins couldn't get married.
Married.
Right, they had to go to Indiana. That's a great story.
So that's a part of history that most people don't even know.
Yes, it is. That's a great story. A great story. Tell me how you met your husband Ben Beasy. How did you two meet?
Well, I can't recall exactly, but
He passed away in 1985, I believe. So how did you two meet?
I really don't remember exactly, but it wound up that on Sunday we used to get together at a friend's house because they had a very nice, small-sized baby grand piano. She played the piano and I would play also, although she was a better pianist than I was. He played the violin, and we borrowed a saxophone from my husband's, who I'm talking about, from his brother. Okay?
And his brother Harry.
His brother Harry. See, your memory is better than mine.
Brother Harry, okay.
And we would have like a little soiree, let's call it anything. We played, we talked, we played games, and the hostess always would give us cookies, in the summertime ice cream, and that's how we were together.
And Harry was married to Dorothy, right? And they had two children, Bobby and Sandy and Bobby, right?
And Bobby.
Sandy and Bobby, Bob. Very nice. So that's interesting. I didn't know about the saxophone story. So you got together, and how did he first start dating you?
It was really, I think I was 16 and he was 18 at that time. After that, I think he got a job. And he used to drive a car, do repairs at the beauty shops. At that time, they made permanents with metal things. And he always made it his business to drive by because he knew when I got out of school, high school. Nobody else. So I had to ask my father and mother if I could get in the car and come. And he promised that he'd be careful. So occasionally he'd been. And then I told him, I don't want you to do this all the time. I just felt uncomfortable because you know how everybody runs out of the entrance when you're going?
Sure.
And this is how it continued, and that's why we knew each other for 5 years before we married.
Wow. And where were you married at?
See, I'm ashamed to tell you that. I can't remember the name of the hotel.
It was a hotel, downtown Chicago?
Yeah, on the north side.
On the north side of Chicago. You married in a hotel.
Okay.
And was it a big affair? Did you have over 100 people? Did you have all the family members?
Everybody who could come came.
Beautiful. And you don't remember the name of the rabbi, though? Doesn't come to you?
If I looked around for some old junk somewhere, I might find
the name.
some old papers.
That's okay. And so tell me...
all I can tell you
that
this rabbi became very, very famous, and I can't remember. It wasn't Cohen. It was also a kind of a
Jewish name.
Real Jewish name, but I can't remember.
And so you had a big reception, dancing, and the whole spiel, and the whole family was together.
Yes.
So did a lot of your cousins, I should say your mother's and father's cousins, come also from Europe to Chicago?
I really don't know. My father didn't have too many.
Your father's family didn't have so many.
He didn't have too many relatives.
Now your father's name was changed to Minch. What was it originally?
So.
Oh, that changed to Minch. That's what my father told me. So that's very good. So that's why you knew the other name. Okay. So your parents, what did your father do for a living?
Well, when I was little, we lived in a black neighborhood. He had on the south side, he had a grocery and meat market.
You were living on the south side?
We lived upstairs of the market. And still, my mother tells these stories, told me these stories many times. The neighbors took care of me and my brother because we were only a year and a half apart. And in those days, you washed the clothes by hand. You didn't have a laundry place to do. And they had a long line strung across some garages from the back. And the black ladies upstairs all helped her when she was pregnant and helped her with the laundry.
So it was a mixed...
My mother used to tell me that.
It was a mixed racial neighborhood, but peaceful.
Oh, yes, no problem.
Very nice, very nice. And now, is it kosher or not kosher?
Who?
Your father's meat. It wasn't because it was the mixed neighborhood.
Not at all.
And that's why you had to go buy their own food from the west side.
Absolutely.
Because it wasn't. Very interesting, very interesting.
Then I remember there was no Jewish bakery at that time.
And the south side by there.
Nothing.
Okay.
And it seems to me there were times when we took the streetcar and we went to visit a relative somewhere and we brought home with us stuff. Food. Whether it was challah or rye bread, I don't remember that. But my mother always had me carry some and my brother carry some. So those are for him and me, I remember, because there was a big period until we moved on the west side when my father had the garage business.
And so from there, your family moved to the north side or to the west side in between? Do you remember?
I can't remember.
Because you lived on all three at one point or another.
I think when we moved to the west side. But it's hard for me to remember because at that time was the first time when you got the small little radios and everybody made those little things, and I can't remember all that stuff.
Yeah.
I wasn't into all this.
So you were married, you and Ben Beasy were married in what year? Do you remember what year it was? 35. Stuart was born in 37.
June 16th.
June 16th was your anniversary, okay, of 35. And then Stuart, and then a few years later Kenny, and then a few years later Chuck and Charles. And Charles was named after your father-in-law. After your father-in-law, Charles, and your mother-in-law had the same name as you in English, Ida.
Right.
And Chaya in Hebrew.
Right. In fact, they objected to the marriage.
Because of the same name.
The same name. And my mother, the smartest woman that ever lived, was talking to her when we were all together. The woman was saying, what's going to happen if I die?
Nobody will be able to be named after
So
me.
my mother says, how many children do you have? She says, 5. She says, well, let one of them named after you there.
There you go. One of the others can do it.
I never forget that. My mother used to tell that story all the time.
Now, it's an interesting story. I want to just jump ahead a little bit because in 1962, you moved to Los Angeles. But it turned out that your husband's two sisters ended up in Los Angeles, her children, and your sister, her children moved to Los Angeles, and your brother's children moved. One of them is in Los Angeles now. One of them was living in Florida and ended up moving to Los Angeles too. Everybody sort of migrated to Los Angeles. Your oldest son, who was already married, Stuart, he ended up moving to Los Angeles in 1980. Everybody ended up in Los Angeles. Was there a reason that you chose Los Angeles? How did you end up moving to Los Angeles from Chicago?
Because I think this is where people got jobs and everything, and the Jewish people that you knew, you stayed together.
Now, you worked for Prudential Insurance, am I right about that?
Yes, late in my life.
Yeah, no, but when you moved to LA, were you working for Prudential in Chicago also?
I went to work when Beasy was working. I didn't go to work for Prudential until Beasy was not well. And I was afraid if something happened, I wanted a little extra income.
So you went here in Los Angeles to the Prudential building you were working in, which is next to the La Brea Tar Pits, right next to there. Now tell me, he also worked insurance, correct?
That's a job that he got after he went out of the garage business.
Right. Now,
For Metropolitan.
Metropolitan, that's what I thought, that's why I asked that.
Then he became assistant office manager, which was good. He didn't have to go down the street. But when we moved to LaGrange, he got a job from them only in the black neighborhood in the evenings, and that's when we decided we can't do this. It's like camping down here and camping here. Got to go to California. Because he wasn't well for a long time.
Very
But he
interesting.
continued working.
And he worked for Metropolitan out here when he came out here. So he transferred sort of along the
They
way.
weren't sure that they would be able to, but the last minute, after we said we'll take a chance. We had cousins living here.
I go back to the west side of Chicago because this is something that people often ask about him. Said, is he the Zelton who had the garage?
Yeah.
He used to have a garage on the west side where people parked their trucks
And-
with their goods on their trucks for them to be protected. So this was like a nighttime garage that they would come in and it would be secure and safe, fruit trucks and things like that, and their goods would stay on their trucks overnight. They would come back and pick them up the next day. Is that correct?
Yes, and in addition, anybody who had a good car, in the heavy winter days, they couldn't park it on the street because it would freeze up and they couldn't go to work. So they would drive over on the way home, and we'd give them car service, drive him back to their home, And the next day, bring them back the car when they needed it. So that was like a chauffeur service.
And they kept their car in the garage also.
Okay.
So everybody, it was a rental garage for people's vehicles.
And I'll never forget, and down the street, there was a place that had horses for livery where people used to come and attach it to their wagons.
Wow.
When we walked by, we had to look in to see if there were any horses.
Wow. And this was on the west side near Pulaski, near Crawford, right?
Right.
Near Crawford, somewhere near Roosevelt Road, somewhere in that area.
Not too far, but
How did he get into the garage business?
because he wasn't making too much business. And my father didn't want, you know how our family is, we want him to make a good living.
Sure.
So my father told him he would sell him one that was a few blocks from where his was.
So your father had a garage?
Right. At one time he was building different businesses, which I can't understand what it was.
And he didn't work, your husband didn't work with your father, but your father helped him get into business himself.
Right. And he saved the money and he paid him back. And I hate to say the price because but somehow or other is in my mind and I can't believe it. That $1,500 could not, but that $1,500 is still in my mind.
That's a lot of money at the time.
Well, all I know is his place was like, we were east of, I was just going to say the name of the street, and my father's place was west, Kildare, past Karloff and all that way.
The K Streets.
While he worked, he prospered, and he paid it back. And then at the end, the neighborhood changed back again, no good. Business wasn't good. We had owned the building after a while. And that was good time. And he rented it to a company that needed a lot of space for their cars and everything. And then things got bad.
It changed. It wasn't a Jewish neighborhood so much anymore like it was.
Nothing, no white hardly, except a few that were still on the side streets,
Sure.
you know. So at that time, he decided that he has to something else, and he went to work.
Life during the Depression. You remember your parents and you during the Depression years. Tell me about the Depression. What was life like when people were having trouble making a living, buying food, having jobs? What was it like when you were young?
Well, the thing that was wonderful about it is they had a lot of the little organizations, well, like we have a B'nai B'rith or anybody else, where the women got together and they do things to raise money. And if they found out the family didn't have, they went and solicited places and brought food to the family.
Wow.
The same for Passover. This is a Passover time coming up that I will never forget. My mother got Passover got together, and I forgot how much she raised. But at that time I took them in my car, and we delivered them to families where we knew that there would be some problem.
So these charitable organizations, Tzedakah, they came and they helped families that were in need.
They were called Pharrell.
Pharrell. And so another thing that I find so interesting, when you were growing up, you actually spoke Yiddish in the house. Was your main language in the house when you were a little girl?
Both.
And I remember when your mother was living in Chicago and then in Florida. I know she was in California also with you, but you used to write her letters in Yiddish up and back.
Well, I still can read it. I can write a little bit because you don't practice it, you forget. So when we have our Sabbath services here, I read the English translation and say, "Oh, you're saying it so nice."
Very
so
interesting.
these are the things. But it's too bad we couldn't make a record of everything that we did and said in those days because we didn't have the facilities for even doing it.
When you were a young married couple and living on the west side at that time, you lived near 16th Street,
16th
right?
and Harding.
16th and Harding, and you had an apartment there. And was the neighborhood, were all your neighbors Jewish? Was that really a Jewish?
It was mixed, because on one side of the street here and there were small houses. And there were a lot of Irish people. Very few Jewish people lived in those small houses. They lived in the apartment buildings.
And there were synagogues everywhere. I know that Stuart had his bar mitzvah at Kehilloth Jacob, which is still, the building is still standing there on the west side, right around the corner where Independence Boulevard curves into Douglas, and you go right around the corner, and there's Kehilloth Jacob still standing. But the synagogue itself, of course, because the neighborhood changed, is now a church, and Kehilloth Jacob is now right down the street from where your sister Norma used to live, in Peterson Park. In Peterson Park, and so the synagogue, the congregation moved, but the building is still there, as are many, the yeshiva, the academy, everything. Those buildings still stand on the west side today. It was synagogues every other block.
What's on Independence Boulevard? Is there anything along?
So there's the big synagogues are now churches. They're still there, and right there at the corner of Independence and Douglas is Herzl School is still right there on the corner where it was. And I know that Stuart went to Penn School, which is right on 16th and Avers. Right, 16th and Avers. And 16th and Avers right there. That school is still standing and still in use today. And the neighborhood is still there. I went by there and I took some pictures of the old apartment buildings, as I did at your home in LaGrange when you moved there after the neighborhood changed. And in LaGrange, you had a nice single family home. You had your two younger children lived there with you because Stuart was already married at that time.
Oh, he lived with us before.
For a short time.
Short time.
He got married in 1959, and that's about the time. And then you had a dog. You had a. That's it here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. I want to thank Ida and wish her only good health. These 120 year, at least to 120 years old and maybe many more. She is the most amazing person that I know. Born in 1914, taping here today, March 2014, after her 100th birthday. And I just would never know anyone like her. And for those of you who don't know, she's my grandmother. Mazel tov to you on your birthday.
Thank you.
Only good health in the future. Thanks for being with us. Remember, if you want to check out our website, it's www.tvrabbi.com. And if you want to send an email, it's info@tvrabbi.com. Hope to see you next time, and hope to see Ida many, many more times right here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. Shalom, everyone.
This has been a Taped with Rabbi Doug production.